this episode is going to have a mature content and language warning because there is some mature content and there is some minor language.
I wanted to touch on something too quick. You had mentioned you had written a book. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and maybe experiences that led to that?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
So I joined the Army National Guard my freshman year of college. I never ever aspired to really do anything for the military because I just claim naivety with it all. I didn't know the difference between a private and a colonel, or that there was an enlisted rank and an officer rank. But I really didn't want to have college debt. And I was in crew my freshman year, rowing on the boats, the long skinny rope.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Okay. A lot of times I say I'm in crew and people have no idea what I'm talking about. So anyways, walking home from school in February, I'm like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get a job this summer? How am I going to pay for school? How am I going to stay in shape? How am I going to have adventure still? And then it just hit me. Why not join the National Guard? I can serve our country. I can knock all those other things off the list. And, it'll give me purpose and something to, I really am a service oriented person. And so it'll help with that. And so it was March of 2001. And my friend said, actually, one of my good high school friends from Waupaca said, do it. What's going to happen in the next 6 years? And then 6 months later was September 11th. So you can, understand that there was a big whoa. So I was deployed for 16 months and spent about 14 of those months in Baghdad, Iraq as a military police officer. And the war was not bad for the first few months I was there. And then it did a complete 180 and we started losing, we lost the first female soldier in the history of the National Guard, and we're getting Purple Hearts a lot. Roadside bombs were prevalent every single day. You just never really knew if you're going to make it. Mortars flying into our compound every night. I mean, it went from being like a camping adventure to like true war. And I journaled every single day while I was there. So this is one of my journals, pictures of my family on it. And then got home and I wrote a book using all of my journal entries. And it's, the original title was How to Peace Standing Up, because as a female in a war environment, you can't knock on somebody's door to use their bathroom. And you also can't drop trow in the middle of an urban fighting environment, because first of all, I wouldn't want to do that for my own sake, but this is a super conservative country. So that would have been just a very disrespectful thing to do anyways. So I had to learn how to go to the bathroom through a funnel. So I thought it was a funny title, How to Peace Standing Up. And my editor and publisher really liked the name Sirens. So we compromised and used both.
If you don't mind me asking, I know, well, I was born after 9/11, so I wasn't a baby or anything when that was happening. And I've heard many stories about what normal everyday life was like before and after 9/11. But if you don't mind, since you're in the military already before and after 9/11, what were some big differences, since you knew there was going to be a conflict from this? What were some changes that maybe we wouldn't expect us normal people that weren't in the military?
Well, so September 11th happened, and I had, one of those really brick-like Nokia phones, and by the time I had to leave for my college class, so it happened about 8:30 to like 10 o'clock was when all this was spiraling on the news. And I think I had a 10:30 class or something. And I got there and I said to the teacher, I'm like, listen, I am in the National Guard. I have no idea if I'm going to get a phone call today or if I'm going to have to go do something. So I'm going to leave my phone on my desk. And this was when it was completely taboo and people were still weirded out by people talking on their phones on the streets. Like, why are you airing out your dirty laundry in front of everybody? But my professor was very, Tim, do you remember like that transition, that weird transition, the first time you saw somebody talking on the street, you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. And you're talking to somebody who just recently got a smartphone. I'd had a flip phone for like 15 years.
You're
So,
smart. You're smart. So, so I didn't get a call that day, but then we either got an email or finally got a phone call, and it was just like, hold fast. We're not doing anything. Nothing's happening. But when we started drilling, which was once a month for the National Guard, it came to a point where we were counting all of our weapons. We were really inspecting like our night vision goggles and making sure that we had everything for everybody, and then mass ordering things that we might need for this impending war. And again, we didn't know what was going to happen. People started invading Afghanistan, or going to Afghanistan. But remember, I went to Iraq, so there was this whole shift, and it was a year and a half. No, I'm sorry. It was a year and a half after 9/11 before I got deployed, because we were deployed in March of 03. And we were put on active duty 4 days before we actually bombed Baghdad. So, Joe, this might be a really good history lesson for you, or maybe you know this, but George W. Bush gave Saddam Hussein the ultimatum of turn over your weapons of mass destruction, which are described as, nuclear weapons,
yeah.
turn them over, or we're going to invade your country. And Saddam Hussein didn't turn anything over. Did he have a lot of weapons and a giant caches of rockets and tons of ways to hurt many people? Yes, but I don't think he ever had. I mean, not to my very humble specialist rank status, I don't think he ever had any nukes. At any rate, Saddam Hussein didn't turn anything over, so we invaded. And I was sitting at the barracks at Fort McCoy, listening to a radio because there was no television. I felt like it was World War II again, listening to the radio on the invasion of Baghdad. And then the Marines came through and kind of took over the country. And then we came in, and we were the very first permanent establishment in Baghdad. We lived in a bombed out building that was owned by one of Saddam Hussein's top guys. I was just looking at rewatching some of the video that I shot while there, and it is complete rubble and soot and black and charred walls, ceilings, floors, everything, with massive holes going through the whole building. And that's where we lived for 9 months. Wow. Because there was no permanent establishment there. So anyways, got home, and I was just like, this is a story that should be told. Like this, there's stuff. I mean, we saw and did a lot of stuff that the general public probably doesn't know anything about.
I mean, how do you even begin, though? We touched on this earlier when we were talking. How do you even begin to describe it? So, because not everybody's going to be able to understand it completely. I mean, that's what I marvel at when I do read something, when they actually can put me right there with them. I mean, how do you even begin to do that?
Well, I just try to take all the senses in when I'm writing. And then also when I got home, there were some very specific moments where I suffered some pretty bad post-traumatic stress episodes. And so I really called those out and tried to give as much detail as possible. And I cannot tell you how many civilians have come up to me and said, oh my gosh, I totally understand what my dad went through. Or I totally understand what my cousin went through now, or I get it better. I can empathize with them more. And that was really one of the purposes of the book, was to bridge the military and the civilian divide, so that you can have somewhat of a better idea of what it's like to go to war. And then, I talk about the brotherhood and the sisterhood of arms, and how you become such a family and so close knit, because like what you touched on, Tim, if you weren't there, it's really hard for other people to grasp it. And so you have this very special bond just because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always kind of bothered me. And at the same time, I'm kind of grateful, I guess, in a sense that, person's lost in their day-to-day activities, going to get their coffee in the morning or whatever, and never gives this sort of thing a second thought. And, of what someone else may have had to go through so they can go get their cup of coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And I get the disconnect. I do.
Yeah.
Unless you've been part of something and I'm going to say special, even though it could be horrific
Mm,
at the same time, you know, it's just, yeah, it's just hard to fathom.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, you talk to many veterans, and 4th of July is a really rough time of year because of fireworks. And so it's just really good to remember before you shoot a firework off. If you have neighbors that are veterans, just let them know. Like
Yeah.
having some semblance of knowledge that it's happening puts me at so much more ease than like having it just go off without me knowing. Because that's really what gets me, is that unknown. Boom.
well, you're seriously, thank you for your service.
Mm.
Yes, thank you.
My father was a Vietnam vet,
Mm.
and unless he never talked about it, unless maybe he had a little too much to drink, then
Oh,
sometimes he would tell me
wow.
stuff that I probably shouldn't have been hearing. That wasn't very
Stuff he
old.
probably should have gotten off his chest, right?
Yeah, but where was he going to go to get it off his chest? I like to think now things are maybe a little better,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I mean, he struggled with it for a very long time.
Mm.
So he
Mhm.
never had any friends from that time.
Ugh.
Well, he quit. They kind of what he told me, and I don't know if this was the combination of the alcohol and the experience, but he said he quit making friends while he was there because they weren't around very long.
Mm.
So,
I believe it.
and I can't comprehend what that's like.
Yeah.
And
It's like why it's the same reason why you don't name your livestock, right? You don't want to get too attached.
well, that being said, I kind of grew up on my grandparents' farm, and we did name our chickens that we butchered later. Anyway, so
Yeah, I mean, so I was towards the end of the deployment driving a Humvee in about a 5 or 6 long convoy. And we were always either the head vehicle or one of the head vehicles. And I was always the driver. And I thought my gunner had slammed something really hard on the Humvee roof. I had no idea what it was. Like I thought he dropped his ammo can or something. And I was about to yell at him, like, don't make loud noises like that. I think it's a bomb. And then this Humvee just zooms right past me and slams into a garage because that Humvee hit an IED. And the compression of the bomb literally sucked the driver out of the vehicle. Like when you see the mushroom clouds where they kind of go up, like that's what happened. It compressed and then pulled her out. And the gunner was one of my best friends. Her name was Carly Garcia, like the one person who could just make me laugh no matter what. And they couldn't find her at first. They thought that she was just gone, but she was knocked in the fetal position, unconscious inside the vehicle with shrapnel wounds all over her face and arms. And the tip of her saw was an inch off, was just sawed right off from a piece of shrapnel. So if her head was up by the tip of her gun, she probably wouldn't have made it. I mean, just so many different facets. But I remember thinking and probably saying out loud, like, you cannot tell me that Carly's gone. I cannot go through this war without her. And so I can imagine if your dad had any of those sentiments, like just staying away from people was probably the best thing. So he could just lean on himself, and that's it.
is your friend physically okay now?
She still does not have full function of one of her hands. And she suffers from hearing damage and definitely some post-traumatic stress, but she is a physician. Like she lives a full life out in Montana, and actually I think she's now a fly fishing guide, which is even cooler.
Where in Montana?
By Bozeman. She ended up in Big Sky, and I don't remember if she moved back down to Bozeman or not.